We start with the tweet heard around the world, or at least around Wall Street. CEO Elon Musk creating chaos with a single tweet. Quote, "I'm considering taking Tesla private, $420 funding secured," which led to the stock soaring and then being halted and then soaring once again. Let's go to Leslie Picker in the newsroom for the details on a wild day for Tesla. Leslie.
Hi, Scott. Wild day indeed. As the stock surged, the questions swirled. Who was providing the financing? What buyout shops would assist Musk in any kind of take private? How finalized is some sort of deal? And is $420 per share a real buyout price? Meanwhile, Musk continued tweeting, but not answering most of the major looming questions. Eventually, the stock was halted for pending news, and about a half hour before the market closed, Tesla published a blog post from Musk titled "Taking Tesla Private." Notably, Musk said a final decision has not yet been made, even though he said he was considering taking Tesla private at $420 per share. He went on to say Tesla would operate better as a private company because they would not be subjected to the volatility in the stock price, nor would they be subjected to quarterly earnings cycle. Musk says as the most shorted stock in the history of the stock market, being public means that there are large numbers of people who have the incentive to attack the company. As Tesla shares resumed trading around $345 today, they skyrocketed higher as investors digested that memo. Tesla ended the day at $379.57 per share, 11% higher. Today's gains followed a similar move after earnings last week. This has created pain for short sellers. Today's on-paper loss amounted to about $1.3 billion. Year to date, they're looking at more than $3 billion in mark-to-market losses. And Scott, if the stock does indeed reach that 420 level, short sellers would be looking at $4.45 billion in paper losses year to date. Perhaps then, and only then, will they cover. Back over to you.
Wow, it's a big sidebar of the story. Leslie, thank you so much. Leslie Picker back at headquarters. All right, Guy, there's obviously two angles here. One, the likelihood of whether you believe that this could happen. Two, the regulatory issues just behind the mechanism in which Musk tweeted this out to the world. The likelihood first. Does this make sense?
The likelihood would be the biggest LBO of all time, I would imagine.
By far.
Karen can answer that. And so with that said, the likelihood is probably less than 25%. But does that mean the stock can't get to 420 on its own? I would submit it can. And listen, our job is to try to figure out if stocks are going higher or lower. Sometimes we do it really well. Sometimes I do it pretty poorly. In terms of Tesla, I think we've done a decent job. And we said a couple weeks ago, very good chance to test 280, got down to 289-ish. We said if it holds there through 325, it's off to the races. It's pretty much exactly what's happened. But if you're short this stock now, given all these headline risk, how do you stay in this on the short side? I continue to say the stock is going to go higher. We can talk about valuation. We're going to talk about if this LBO happens. I don't think anything that matters right now. I think what matters is buyers control, and the people that own the stock for the long haul are not getting out, even if it gets to 420, by the way.
He's been gunning for the shorts in this. He's public about it. He goes out over the top on Twitter, wherever he can.
He's done it in the last
talks about gunning for
less
the shorts.
than a week, right? It was David Einhorn a week or so ago. I'm going to send him, a pair of short shorts.
Going after Goldman Sachs for making a call that they made on the stock. Look, at the end of the day, how is this at all in line with Reg FD? I mean, full disclosure on names. I mean, from my perspective, as a CEO of a company, to come out and put price targets on stocks, talking about specific price targets on where an LBO may or may not happen or where they've had discussion, it was a forced action to get shorts to cover and to have this kind of action in the stock. I think that he's incentivized now to do it. He just rolled out his incentive plan 3 months ago. He put really high expectations on it purposely to get the street in that sort of mode where there's the potential they could hit 100 billion market cap. First tranche gets released, then 650 billion. I just think it's insane. I think that the behavior and the actions by Elon Musk in this, it's actually probably borderline, if not illegal, and it's disgusting to act like that as a CEO.
Karen?
I think, the Twitter release is unusual, but not unprecedented. And so
you're allowed.
You're allowed
by SEC rules to
but you have to
what he hasn't done yet, though. What he hasn't done yet.
Through social media.
He's a 5% holder. He has a 13D obligation. He needs to amend his 13D. And I think he needs to amend it today or tomorrow. And more than 180 characters of what he's thinking about. I think we'll see that shortly. Maybe he'll just attach that letter that we've just seen, and that'll be enough. I don't think it should be enough. I mean, when he says financing secured, it would seem to me he would really have a duty to talk in great detail.
It's so hard to know
about what that is.
Truly what that means, to your point,
it's
right?
really hard to know what that
funding
means.
secured
Right.
Are the words he used. In an earlier tweet, he said investor support is confirmed, or a later tweet. But you get the point.
He alone owns 20%, and maybe he talked to Barron, whatever, and feels like there is support. And there very well may be support. That with funding secured, he needs to go into a lot more detail than that. One other curious thing to me, I don't know if it makes a difference, he has a convert that comes due March of next year.
March.
And it is now in the money, meaning it will convert to stock, not to debt anymore. I'm not really sure if that was part of the manipulation. $920 million
They got
float.
$2.2 billion in cash. They're burning $700 a quarter. So at the rate you're talking about, 100% agree with you on that, Karen. Like when this convert comes due, if it's below $358 a share, he's got to come up with cash.
Look, here's my view on this stock. First of all, this is a new level of engagement on Twitter, even for Elon Musk. So this isn't just, bluster. This is, giving a fair amount of detail, even though no one has any detail. There was not any rumor in the market that these guys were about to do an LBO. In fact, a lot of people were wondering about their next cap raise and what it was going to look like. By the way, also a tremendous sideshow in front of the fact that the company's not hitting any of their delivery targets. Apparently, nobody cares. Now, the Saudi Arabia element of this, I'm not terribly impressed when I hear about a sovereign.
Just to remind people of the news that really got Tesla
that was
to the
news.
top of the paper today, or if you want so to speak, the headline is the investment by the Saudis sovereign wealth fund into Tesla, some $2 billion or thereabouts, according to the Financial Times, which broke the news. That was the first step in the chain of events that led to this conversation here with the further
and are they
tweets
related,
about maybe
Scott?
going private.
Because ultimately that's the question. Are they the backstop?
That would be
here?
one hell of a coincidence, don't you think, if both of those happen within 15 to 20 minutes of each other?
It probably would be. They certainly could write one hell of a check. But when I think about sovereign wealth funds making investment in companies, I don't think about them being early. I don't think about them terribly, as very strong investors, in fact. And when I think about the Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to be diversifying in other sources of energy. This is a total strategic no-brainer for them at any price, basically. So that doesn't necessarily get me fired up as a portfolio investor. Here's what I want to say about Tesla stock, and even if it goes at 420. This is a stock that over the last 4 years, for a technology company, a software company, whatever the bulls want to call it, has annualized at 8% over the last 4 years, drastically underperforming the triple Qs or the NASDAQ. So, great stuff. And if you've been along for the long ride, you annualize at 8%. If you haven't timed every one of these moves, you've either gotten your face ripped off or you've actually missed a lot of this rally. So that's what I'll tell you. From a volatility, risk-reward perspective, valuation perspective, even if it goes out at 420, have it, go have it. I don't get it.
What happens if it doesn't happen? What happens if the go private doesn't happen?
Well, 2 days ago.
What are you left with?
You're left with what you were 2 days ago.
Right.
Right? I mean, maybe.
But there are a lot of people who bought the stock in the afternoon when all of this was happening before the halt.
From 370, 360 to 380 or wherever it is right now.
You saw the
Earlier
surge
today
in
was
activity and volume.
335. That was before the Saudi thing, which probably will still be in place whether or not this happens. Otherwise, they're probably insider trading.
Right. Well, just to be clear on the Reg FD disclosures and the way that works on Twitter, you are allowed to go out on that platform and give disclosures about cash flow, targets, whatever you want, as long as you provide investors with the time and venue.
Sort of the heads up.
The heads
that
up
something's
that you're
coming,
do it.
and that's
They
the
didn't do
nuanced
that.
sort of gray area
It's a very gray
of how
area.
all of this works. Let me also just bring you the news from my conversation with Jim Chanos before we go too far. We talked about Musk's war with the short sellers, and one of the reasons, and maybe one of the principal reasons why he in his letter tonight lays out what he's had to deal with the short sellers. Chanos saying the short position is the best thing the stock has going for it. Musk versus the shorts is a far better narrative than Tesla versus Mercedes, Audi, and Porsche.
That's very good.
That's from Jim Chanos to us about how he's thinking about all of this. And I'd say with a healthy dose of skepticism at the very least, just given what kind of numbers are being thrown around for a company that's still losing money, and who's going to finance it along with.
The big issue for Tesla to me is not even that they're losing money. It's to me that the Germans are competing massively in this space. And this is a data company, by the way. And so we're in a world where people are looking at data differently. If you think that Tesla has no competition, has such a big head start, I think you're missing the point here. And this is why I just don't understand the cult status here. I think what they're doing is fantastic. By the way, these weren't Elon Musk's original ideas, but he's put a company together. He's a visionary XYZ. But the way this company's being run, and we know he doesn't like being a public company. He's told us that for years. It's like listening to a hedge fund manager say, I hate the monthly reporting cycle because I've got to, invest differently. You signed on, you took the money, you went down this road, and the public markets have been very good to Tesla.
Right. Chanos's point is pretty clear, too, right? This cult status you speak to, bluster can contend with a short seller. Fundamentals have a much harder time doing that. And once you get into a head-to-head battle with some of the names of the automakers that Chanos throws out, it perhaps becomes a much more difficult game.
Yeah, and he actually played the shorts or actually went against the shorts probably a little bit too early. To Karen's point, given the fact that he's got this convert that comes due in March, he should have let it go for a little while. And I mean, maybe come out in a different time frame and allow the stock to get to that level so that he had a little more security around it. In my opinion, I don't think it stays up here for too long. I think the real story comes out, and I think the stock sells.
Let me ask you one more question before we bring in our friend Gene Munster. If we did not get the tweets about the go private, the Saudi investment alone, what would your commentary be on that fact alone? That's pretty strong for the bullish narrative behind Tesla. Doesn't it remove some of the financing questions? What would you all be saying tonight if that was it?
But to me, that's like looking at 13F, Scott. That was yesterday's news.
That's
and it maybe explains a lot of the support for the stock.
It's not.
Well, look, I get that they could be a strategic. It's Saudi Arabia. Let's face it, the biggest energy producer in the world would want to be in this
That's the substance, isn't it?
No, the substance is getting to scale next quarter and getting gross margins at 25%. That's what it is, and he's been telegraphing that to the street. So if he can get to production of which he claims he can get to and have a margin at 25%, people will be fine with it. But I don't think that's possible.